Hi everyone, and welcome to Open Forensics Lab. In this video, we are talking about how to prepare a communication analysis speech. Communication analysis can be a tricky event to understand at first because it's not quite the same as an informative speech or a persuasive speech. In an informative speech, your goal is to teach the audience about a topic. In a persuasive speech, your goal is to convince the audience that something should change. In communication analysis, your goal is to analyze how communication works. More specifically, you will choose a communication artifact, apply a rhetorical theory or model, and explain what your analysis reveals about meaning, persuasion, identity, power, culture, or public discourse. In this video, we'll walk through 5 parts of preparing a communication analysis speech. First, we'll define the key pieces of the event: artifact, theory, and research question. Second, we'll look at how to write an introduction that identifies your artifact and sets up your analysis. Third, we'll explain the 3-part body structure: theory, analysis, and implications. Fourth, we'll review how to use research and sources. And fifth, we'll talk about preparing the speech for delivery. Let's start by breaking down the event itself. A communication artifact is the thing you are analyzing. It might be a speech, advertisement, social media trend, protest sign, portrait series, film scene, music video, political campaign, public apology, piece of street art, or another example of communication. A rhetorical theory is the lens you use to analyze the artifact. A theory gives you vocabulary and concepts for explaining how the artifact creates meaning or influence. You can think of it as the tool you use to see the artifact more clearly. A research question guides the analysis and tells the audience what you are trying to discover. A simple formula is: how does this artifact use this rhetorical strategy to produce this effect? For example, how does Luke Guilford's portrait series, National Anthem, use visual enactment to challenge our perception of rural and queer communities? The key is that communication analysis is not just a report on the artifact. It is not enough to say, here's what this speech, image, or performance is about. Instead, you are making an argument about how the artifact communicates and why that communication matters. Now let's talk about the introduction. Your introduction should begin with an attention getter. This opening should contextualize the artifact and establish the stakes. You might introduce a public controversy, describe a striking image, reference a cultural moment, or explain why the artifact caught public attention. Then identify the artifact clearly. Be specific. Tell the audience exactly what you are analyzing. Next, present your research question. This is the question your speech will answer through analysis. Your introduction should also preview the 3 main points: theory, analysis, and implications. And a helpful way to build the communication analysis speech is to organize it into those 3 main points. Main point 1 introduces the theory. In this section, you are teaching the audience the rhetorical theory, model, or framework you will use. You should identify the key scholar or scholars, explain the major ideas of the theory, and clarify why this theory is useful for analyzing your artifact. A common mistake is to start analyzing the artifact too early. In the first main point, focus on teaching the theory. Give the audience the tools they will need before you apply them. Main point 2 is the artifact and analysis. This is where you apply the theory to the artifact. You move from abstract concepts to specific evidence. If you are analyzing a speech, you might examine particular phrases, metaphors, arguments, or patterns. If you're analyzing a visual artifact, you might discuss color, framing, bodies, symbols, setting, gaze, or composition. If you're analyzing a performance, you might examine movement, staging, sound, costume. The important thing is that this section should prioritize original analysis, not summary. Do not simply describe what happens in the artifact. Explain how the artifact uses communication strategies and connect those strategies back to the theory. For example, instead of saying, "The portrait shows a queer cowboy standing in a field," you might say, "By placing queer identity within rural imagery associated with traditional masculinity, the portrait visually challenges the assumption that queerness and rural life are incompatible." That's analysis. It explains what the artifact is doing and why it matters rhetorically. Main point 3 explains the implications. This is where you answer the "so what" question. Your implications should explain why the analysis matters beyond the artifact itself. What does your analysis reveal about culture, power, identity, ideology, representation, persuasion, or public discourse? For example, if your speech analyzes a political slogan, your implications might explain how language shapes public fear or belonging. If your speech analyzes a portrait series, your implications might explain how visual rhetoric can challenge stereotypes. If your speech analyzes street art, your implications might explain how public images can resist political erasure. The implications point should extend the analysis, not simply repeat it. This is where the audience should understand why your argument matters in the world beyond the speech. Now let's talk about research. A strong communication analysis speech should be grounded in credible sources. A good target is usually around 7 to 10 sources, though you should always follow your coach's or tournament's expectations. You will likely need sources in a few categories. First, you need sources that explain your theory. These are often peer-reviewed sources from communication or rhetorical scholarship. You might find them in databases like Communication and Mass Media Complete, or in journals such as Quarterly Journal of Speech, Journal of Contemporary Rhetoric, Rhetoric and Public Affairs, or Poroi. Second, you may need sources that provide context for the artifact. These might help explain the artist, speaker, campaign, historical moment, public controversy, or audience response. Third, you may need sources that support your implications. These help explain why your analysis matters beyond the artifact. Finally, prepare the speech for delivery. Communication analysis speeches usually have a maximum time limit of 10 minutes. So a strong target is often between 8 and 9.5 minutes. This gives you enough time to develop the theory, analysis, and implications without risking going over time. Because CA can involve complex ideas, delivery is especially important. Practice explaining the theory in a way that feels clear and teachable. Slow down when defining key terms. Pause after the research question. Use transitions to help the audience follow when you are moving from theory to analysis to implications. You should also practice from memory or with the notes allowed by your coach or tournament. Your goal is to sound clear, confident, and conversational, not like you are reading an academic paper out loud. Before you compete, ask yourself, did I clearly identify my artifact? Did I explain my theory before applying it? Did I analyze instead of summarize? And have I practiced delivering complex ideas clearly? Communication analysis can feel challenging, but at its core, the event asks a clear question. What does this artifact teach us about how communication shapes the world? Thanks for watching Open Forensics Lab.